All right, good morning, everybody. Okay, we are going to take a quick second to review what we've seen in the genres that we've looked at through the text set on superheroes this week. But I want you to be thinking about what you wrote in your Venn diagrams for yesterday when you compared two different pieces in the set. So, on these genre notes, when you open them up, we're just going to review really quick what a genre even is. So, genre just means it's a form, it's driven by whatever the content is and whatever rules of style are within that particular genre. But it's necessary to distinguish certain features from other things because, as readers, it helps us figure out what the meaning or message behind it is going to be based on the form that it takes because we have certain expectations when we think of poetry. We have certain expectations when we think of drama. And so when the form isn't consistent with what we expect, it's hard for us to understand the message behind it. So genres function um, for different reasons. So sometimes we learn our communication skills based on certain forms. It's very much like when you want to talk to your friends versus when you want to talk to your teacher or your principal or maybe a family member. Those kind of function as different communication genres. Sorry, those are my dogs. In any case, all of these different functions are based off of the genre that they embody. It's this idea of a code of behavior between the writers and the readers, and so that there are certain expectations and rules that are followed within each genre. So the first one we looked at was fiction, and we pretty much understand the plot diagram at this point. We know that there are these typical things that are developed throughout the story. They will have some sort of climax, there is some sort of conflict, and that's going to be true for all fiction. Poetry, we understand, are they follow certain rhythmic and metrical patterns. Some of them don't. If they're free verse, they don't really necessarily follow any rules. But we'll know that with poetry, that it's typically shorter. It's more imaginative. It's meant to be written for the most part, but there is oral poetry or spoken poetry. But I like the second bullet point where writers or poets express their emotions through poetry because they usually express difficulty expressing emotions in any other fashion, which is why a lot of people associate poetry with music because a lot of people who write music are able to express their feelings that way when they don't necessarily have the words to do so in any other fashion. So that's why think of like this idea of songwriter or lyrics, right? Like as in lyrical poetry. Drama is a fictional representation through dialogue and performance. It is an imitation of some sort of action. It's also a type of play that is written for theater or television or film. So think about a screenplay or a script. And one of my favorite performances right now, because it's technically a film, but it's technically a performance on Broadway, is Hamilton. And even though Hamilton represents a historical, event or person who is real, the actual drama itself is fictional, right? Because I mean, these people clearly aren't the original people that they're portraying on stage. So nonfiction has a lot of different types of subgenres. Nonfiction also basically means that it is true. But it could be creative, like when you write personal essays, like the essays that we could write in terms of narratives. It could also be factual, like scientific or research papers. It can use figurative language, but it's not going to be as like you would in fiction or poetry. Sometimes nonfiction can tell a story, like in autobiographies or biographies, but other nonfiction examples include diaries or journals or mysteries or romances. They could still be true stories, but they are written in a different type of style to convey that information. And the last one is multimodal. This is a fancy word But basically, this just means it's a combination of two or more modes. So the infographic that was the last thing that on your document is a multimodal text because it employs the words, like you have to read the numbers and comparing 1939 to 2009, I think it was. And you also have to rely on the contrasting images side by side. So you're not just focusing on written language or the image or the way it's designed. You're focusing on a bunch of things. So like in a picture book, if you've ever read anything by Dr. Seuss, or if you've ever read any any kind of children's book, it's not just about the print or the words, it's also about the images. And all of it contributes to the telling of a story. Another example would be a movie. It combines images and music and spoken language and written language and the spacing between people and certain acting and gestures to convey meaning. So all of these would be examples of multimodal. That's not to say that a picture book can't just be fiction, but it doesn't just rely on words. It relies on words and images and that interaction between the two in order for it to be truly meaningful. So for today, you're going to click on your writer's notebook, and completing this slide is the only way to verify your attendance. You have to open this because if not, I will mark you absent. So on slide number 5, you're going to choose two options from the superheroes text. I would really go with the ones you chose for yesterday's Venn diagram. And if you haven't, what you do today can be used in that Venn diagram. So, in your paragraph, you're going to write what you noticed about the way the writer presented their ideas in those two texts. So, how are the ideas presented in the poem versus, let's say, the infographic? So, you'll choose those two and write a paragraph, which is about 4 to 7 sentences, that discuss some of the similarities and differences. Again, I would really just use what you put in yesterday's Venn diagram to help you with this. And you probably do need some specific examples in this as well. So I have my example notebook link here for you. And I created a page that will help you write the paragraph, especially if you struggle getting started. So you'll notice that I think this is about 5 sentences or so, but if you just start with this rough structure and just fill in that information, this will be a really strongly constructed paragraph. So the two options from the text that I chose were, and then you tell me your choices. I noticed that the ideas in, let's say, the poem were presented through how. How was the ideas presented? And you should have that in your Venn diagram, right? On the other hand, the ideas in the infographic, let's just say, were presented through images and the comparison between numerical figures or something like that, right? And then those would be those specific examples because I have to really say from those text options how those ideas are presented. One thing both choices had in common is that, and then you'll tell me what they have in common. And in contrast, or on the other hand, or whatever you want to say there, one of the most noticeable differences between the two options was, and then you'll tell me there. And that's between the two different choices, okay? So using that paragraph structure, I think is going to be super helpful in completing today's assignment. So you can submit it. That would also show me that it is done. But I am going to go through everybody's links. And if you have not even opened the writer's notebook yet, you will be marked absent for today. Okay, because that's literally the only thing. Tomorrow, I just want to let you know that you are going to get a daily grade for making sure slides 3 through 5 are complete. It's an automatic 100 if you've completed all 3. So again, my example is there for you, so you can go back and see what you're supposed to do on the other slides. And then we will be back on Zoom tomorrow during your regular class period. All right, I'm available via Remind and email today, and I hope you have a great Thursday. We'll see you guys tomorrow.